Science Museum in London. So with this video I'm not planning to give a tour around the Science Museum, but rather pick out my favourite things that are in here. I've been coming to this museum since a little child. I don't come so often now because, various reasons, but certainly over the years I've favourite objects that I always go to and have a look at. It's a model of a double beam engine made by Benjamin Hick in 1840. Beautifully made model. This is an inkstand and a cut glass bowl made by Matthew Bolton, who's a very famous silversmith. I've always been fascinated by this pendulum. So it hangs right from the ceiling right at the top there and comes down onto this dial. And as you can see it's swinging back and forth. And basically as the Earth rotates, it moves around the dial. It's just coming up to 3 o'clock at the moment. And when we come back in a couple of hours time, this would have moved around. Always fascinating me. This is an engine from a V2 rocket. And then over here, this is one of the engines from the Saturn V. Obviously the rocket that went to the moon. And if you know anything about these, this was Von Braun's legacy. So started off with the V2 and then perfected the design with the Americans into the J2 engine in 1966. And this capsule here and the associated parachute is what took, is a Soyuz capsule that took Tim Peake to the space station. See all the scorch marks on there. Yeah, he went to the space station in 2016. Heat shield tiles from the space shuttle.
In orbit, the crew can move around freely in weightlessness.
This here is the 1991 spacesuit worn by Helen Sharman. First Briton in space. And her mission was to the Mir space station, not the current space station. And this is Puffing Billy. 1814, the oldest surviving steam locomotive. Absolutely marvellous. Stood for hours looking at this model over the years. I believe this used to be in the upstairs gallery with all the machinery. You can see the workbench at the end here with the vices. You see the engine at the end there. Driving the pulleys at the top, everything belt driven. What a wonderful model. It says here it's a model of a machine workshop. Doesn't say who made it or when. And at the top here you can see a toy train that was made for Alfred, the son of Sir Edgar Watkin in 1866. Can anybody guess what this is? I'll give you another clue. Let's come round to the side, make it a little bit clearer. This is a 1929 Miss England. Henry Seagate's boat. And of course the Rolls-Royce Merlin. Probably my favourite engine of all time. Nothing sounds like a Merlin. And this is one of my favourite exhibits in here. They've got a couple of these engines, but this one is the Series 1. This is a Frank Whittle engine without this, the world wouldn't be what it is today. And of course, not forgetting the bubble cars. Now, this strange thing up here has quite a connection to me. So when I was studying, one of our projects was to design a stand for charging this. So basically, although we never got our hands on the car and we weren't racing it, was one of the modules that we had to do, which, as I say, design and make a model of a stand that this would stand on, so you could point the solar array at the sun. And if I can find it, I'll put some pictures in of the stand, which I've still got somewhere. And these are 1950s crash test dummies, which I do have a fairly big connection with my day-to-day job. It's up here a Brompton cycle. I mentioned before that I started out my career as a mechanic working for Raleigh. Brompton was one of the cycles that we used to service. This crazy contraption up here is indeed the Rolls-Royce Flying Bedstead, as it became known. It's actually a rig for testing thrust, and basically they use this to test the principles of vertical flight, and indeed this led on to the development of the Harrier jump jet. This array of switches is, I've not seen this before, this is new here. This is a command module simulator from NASA for the Apollo program. So there's 3 of these, and this is what the astronauts trained on. And this here is the actual Apollo 10 command module. Quite humbling to see. And this is, not seen this before, but just down here on the side, they've got the patches of all of the Apollo programs right through. There's Apollo 11 in the middle there, right the way through to the final mission. The good old Colchester CNC machine. Things have come on a bit since then. There's all kinds of items in here. I mean, obviously you see the Raleigh chopper at the top there. And right in the centre there, can you see the credit card machine? I should think my kids wouldn't have a clue what that is. I remember having to fill out the dockets in the shop that I worked, and then you'd put the card in there and run the roller across it. Only people of a certain age will know what on earth I'm talking about. And down the bottom there's a Mammoth steam engine and an Apple computer. There's something that's quite important to me, the Sinclair ZX. I actually had a ZX81. That was my very first computer that I got involved in. The Casio keyboard. All kinds of items in here that are just consigned to the history books. Satellite dish. Just unheard of now. Another one of my favourite things. Cutaway of the Mini. Just shows how ingenious the suspension is on this, with the cones on the back wheels and the rubber mounted bump stops and things on the front. And we saw earlier the engine. Well, here's the V2 rocket. So I always stop and look at these. Anybody want to guess what they are? These are actually the Concord wind tunnel models that they used for the development of the shape of the delta wing. Beautiful lathe here. This is from 1816. Now upstairs there used to be a gallery absolutely full of machines like this, and yeah, sadly it's all gone and there's just a few bits and pieces dotted around. They used to have all the machines in there, and My father would often take me in there and tell me what they were all for. So you may have seen my video from the London Transport Museum in Acton, and when I was walking around in there I mentioned that one of the carriages we were in did used to be here in the Science Museum. Well, this area here, in between these pillars, this is where the Caerphilly Castle and the Deltic prototype resided, and they were here for many years. I certainly remember them being here in the 80s, and I think they left in 96 if I'm right, and then this gallery was developed into this sort of modern age attraction that you see now. We saw earlier the different aerofoils, but this one here is the Concord wind tunnel model of 1959. It's quite fun. Look at that. And your kitchen. Lovely model of the Princess Royal. And a coach behind it. Rolls-Royce Supermarine Seaplane. We'll see the real one of those in a few minutes. If it's still here, I assume it would be. I wouldn't know how they'd get it out the building. Daimler Lorry Workshop. At the top here, a Rolls-Royce Silver Ghost. What a beautiful model that is. Got a cutaway engine. It's rather nice. And a blacksmith's tool workshop. Beautiful detail. Now I remember this one being on display. The American 440 steam locomotive. 1875. It's been part of the museum's collections since 1880. It is dated from 1827, and it's actually believed that this was built, the model was built by Timothy Hackworth. This is indeed the top of that pendulum I showed earlier. They've just come over the edge, follow it all the way down. Not very good with heights. Right at the bottom then, you can see the pendulum still swinging. So those that do watch the channel a lot will know that I'm a big fan of the Pleasure Beach in Blackpool, and as you walk into the Pleasure Beach there's the captive flying machines. Probably the oldest, well, it is the oldest ride in the UK now, and is an absolute treasure. Well, that was built and designed by a fellow called Hiram Maxim, and what a lot of people don't realise is that was actually an instrument that he used for testing some of his principles of flight, but also to raise money for his aircraft. So there's a couple of pictures here that show the aircraft that he built, and it attached to its test bed. Now this aeroplane shot down this test bed and created such amount of lift that it actually broke loose and flew. And arguably, you know, obviously the Wright brothers were the first to have controlled flight, but it is believed that Maxim had cornered the principles of flight before that. Unfortunately the machine was damaged, and that's why he built the flying machines, to try and raise some more funds, and there's several of them built. There's a set at Southport, set at the Crystal Palace, Blackpool, there's a couple of others as well I believe. But in here, this is the actual steam engine from that aircraft. We've got a model of the aircraft here, and this over here is the experimental petrol engine that he was working with. And indeed, had he been able to fund the project, maybe the history would have been different. So Hiram Maxim was also famous, came up with the Maxim machine gun and various other projects. I'm actually doing a video on the flying machines at the moment. I keep doing little bits of it and coming back to it, so one day I'll get that finished and you know, sort of tell the history of Maxim and its connection to flying machines, because you know, it's my belief that he's certainly one of the UK's major engineers, and not particularly well known. model here of the Wright Flyer. Now, I can't find any reference to it in here, but I'm sure I read that the Wright Flyer was in this gallery up until about 1920, when it was obviously sent back over to Washington to the Smithsonian. I might be wrong, but I seem to recall that from somewhere. Rack upon rack of engines here. I'll just walk down these very quickly. Every possible permutation of aircraft engine. Look at that monster. Absolute monster. It's a Tornado diesel engine. A Beardmore, never heard of it. De Havilland Gypsy engine. And again another couple of Whittles engines here. Rolls-Royce Trent engine, the turboprop, huge turbofan engine there from get my tongue around it, from Rolls-Royce, and Olympus engine. These are obviously off the Concord. I've just come down here because I always makes me chuckle, this one. Aerobatic biplane stuck on the ceiling, dated from 1969. Now, it's absolutely incredible. We are in the middle of London and they've got full-size aircraft in here, but there is one aircraft obviously that they couldn't fit, which is the 747. So if you can't fit a 747 in here, why not have a slice? It just gives some idea of how absolutely huge 747 is. Now downstairs we saw the flying bedstead, and this is indeed the engine out of the Harrier jump jet, and you can see the 4 nozzles here where you would vector the thrust from the engine. This side's actually got the nozzles on, so it makes a bit more sense. Right, this is another one of my favourite items. So this is the 1955 Christopher Cockerell's experimental hovercraft. So we saw a model of this downstairs, and here's the real thing. So this is the Seaplane, the Rolls-Royce Seaplane designed by Reginald Mitchell. And if you look at it closely, obviously Mitchell went on to develop the Spitfire, and you can certainly see cues in the Seaplane of the Spitfire. Now this plane was so successful in the competitions it entered that it actually won the Schneider Trophy outright, and indeed the Schneider Trophy is just behind the plane. So I'm just going to read this out because my memory's not all that. The Schneider Trophy was offered in 1912 to encourage the development of marine aviation by Jack Schneider, a balloonist and aviator. The trophy became the outright property of the Royal Aero Club after the third British win in 1931. And you can see it sits on this marble base. It's a fantastic piece of artwork, really. And you see it on the base there, and then with the sculpture at the top. So just a reminder, we are in the middle of central London, and this is the top floor of the Science Museum. and these indeed are the aircraft that they have in here. So this is the de Havilland Moth aeroplane that Amy Johnson made her first solo flight from England to Australia. That was in 1930. Sorry, the plane's from 1928. She made the flight in 1930. And this big aircraft over the back here is a 1919 Vickers Vimy. And this particular aircraft is one that John Alcock and Arthur Whitten Brown made the first non-stop flight across the Atlantic. Wow, can you imagine flying across the Atlantic in an open cockpit like that? We take it for granted these days, don't we? Jason up there, Moth, Johnson's plane. A slightly better view there of the Supermarines seaplane, the S6B from 1931. The plane up here is the Messerschmitt 163B Comet from 1944. It's the only rocket-propelled fighter to be used in operational service. These had a horrific reputation. So they only carried enough fuel for about 10 minutes of power flight, and the aircraft was supposed to glide back and landing on the skid. These were the flying bombs, which are pilotless. I watched an interesting program on these the other day. I didn't realise they had such a, sort of checkered history, where they built the ramps for these, and obviously the Brits saw the ramps, didn't know what they were for, bombed them anyway. So they ended up making movable ramps, and right at the end of the war, they managed to launch these onto London. Got here a Gloucester E-28/39, 1941. The first jet-propelled aircraft to fly in Britain. It was built with the new jet engine being developed by Frank Whittle and his team Power Jets. These two planes really need no introduction. The Hawker Hurricane and the Supermarine Spitfire. The one here, over the back there. We'll go down underneath and have a look up. And then over here, just above where we were looking at the jet engine from the Harrier, we indeed have a Harrier in here. I'm just going to pan round again to the slice of the 747 that you can see there. So yeah, it's not a bad collection of planes in here. And as I say, you've got to keep in mind where we are. This is middle of London on the top third story of the Science Museum. So how on earth they got them in here, I have no idea. Beautiful model there of the Concord. Right, the Clockmakers Museum. Right, there's only one watch in here I'm going to show you. Museum's fascinating. If you've got time to come and have a look around in here, certainly if you're into clockmaking or watch making, horology is it? This is what I wanted to show you. So this is a portrait here of John Harrison, and this is a patent for his lesser watch, and this is a replica. It's never known whether the watch actually exists. It's become a real myth of legends, and indeed if you've watched Only Fools and Horses, this is what Del Boy apparently finds in the back of his Capri. That's what he called the Capri, by the way. A Capri gear. Those who are not in the UK will have no idea what I'm talking about. I've not seen this here before. Recreation of a chemist optician's Gibson and Son. Let's have a quick look inside.
As you know, I'm very keen, but as we have no customers, I was wondering if I might be able to take my break now?
Fascinating. I read in a book once about baby incubators that they were actually developed by a showman in Coney Island.
I was told I would never have children.
What he would do is he developed the incubator, and he'd offer parents with premature babies that he would help them survive if they'd allow him to put them on show. So he had sort of a curiosity show on Coney Island where people would pay to go and see these tiny little babies in the incubators. And he had a really, really high success in seeing the infants through those early days where they'd been born prematurely. And although he made a fair bit of money as a showman, he then went on to develop the incubator into what we know today. That must be absolutely terrifying to be inside one of these, medical isolation. This is an iron lung from 1953, but we spoke earlier about Hiram Maxim. One of his early inventions was indeed a version of the iron lung, and he also invented a very early inhaler. He suffered from bronchitis himself and developed an inhaler to soothe his symptoms, or invented an inhaler, I guess, to soothe his symptoms. So I was just walking through the medical gallery. I wouldn't normally come in here because it's not my kind of thing, but I noticed this here. Anybody else remember these? They used to be in shoe shops, and indeed you'd go in there and have an x-ray for fitting your shoes. Well, it's a couple of hours later. I'm just back at the Pendulum, and you can see it was swinging at 3 earlier. It's now swinging at about 5. Well, I've had a fantastic day walking around the Science Museum here in Exhibition Road, South Kensington in London. Fantastic place. I mean, it has changed from the older days, and things do move on. You know, I had a little moan about the coffee shops, but needs must these days. You know, these things need to be funded, and if a cup of coffee funds the building, then so be it. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed my ramblings, and it's been a little bit of interest. If you haven't already subscribed, please can you consider doing so. It really does help. It helps the algorithm. It's going to help the channel, and above all, it gives me a kick to get on and make some more videos. So yeah, please, if you can do that, I'll be very, very grateful. Anyway, I think I'll wrap this one up. My feet are absolutely killing me, and I'm going to get on the train back home. So thank you ever so much for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one.